Before we get started, I do ask that if you enjoy my channel, if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Because I hope that this video shows that I don't stand for this kind of nonsense. And that I'm not here to mollycoddle, and I'm not here to shelter you. So, like and subscribe, and let's talk about racism and witchcraft. Can a racist practice witchcraft? The answer to that is emphatically no. However, our community has a long and sordid history of racism against the First Nations, against Black people and African Americans, against Hispanic and Latinx folks. And I'm here to address that, to turn an unflinching eye towards the racism that has been employed in the name of magic and witchcraft for the sake of racial purity, and how it has been used as a tool by the white majority to oppress people. I am doing this in honor of George Floyd, in honor of Brionna Taylor, in honor of Tamir Rice, and in honor of all of the people of color who have been murdered and executed by the police in the United States. I wish that I wish that my magic could bring them back, but it can't. And so I am making this video to hopefully make the world a better place. Because we, as witches and magicians, owe it to other marginalized communities to protect and empower and elevate them. Because until we are all equal, none of us will be. So, before we really launch in, I want to talk about my backdrop today. Because I usually use a tapestry with the Wheel of the Year, because it's super witchy and I just love the witchy aesthetic and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But I'm using my Soviet flag because our capitalistic system has made these murders possible. It has commodified human life. Your life, my life, are reducible to profit and loss statements. And that is not acceptable. And so I'm coming out again as a communist. And I'm not saying that communism is the right answer. I'm not saying that communism is the only answer. But until we break free of the bipartisan system in the United States that has made the systemic racism possible, nothing is going to change. There is going to be another George Floyd. So, with that said, the first issue I want to tackle is the topic of black magic, the term black magic. Because I produced a video on TikTok dealing with this subject, that black magic is a racist term, and boy, howdy, people dropped on me like a cube of bricks. I stand by that statement. Black magic is a racist term. Now there is Mongolian black shamanism, there's other traditions that incorporate the use of the term black, of the word black. But as it pertains to our colloquial lexicon, the vocabulary of words we use in everyday life, when somebody says black magic, they are not thinking about Mongolian black shamanism. They are thinking about evil magic. They are thinking about satanic magic in a negative sense. Like I've said before, friends with many demonologers, I love them. They are some of the best people I've ever met. But they are not using it with those obscure traditions in mind. They are using it because in colonial New England, that is where the term actually started in the US, when slaves and indentured servants were brought over. When black witchcraft, when those black supernatural beliefs, when black spirituality was brought here, that is when they started calling it black magic. And it preys on everyone's worst fears, that the big black man is gonna come and get you. And so, I wish that I didn't have to be so forceful about this. I wish I wasn't so passionate about this. But this is America. And we must turn and face our own community's implicit racism. And that starts with black magic. Like I said, colonial New England, the whites would not touch, not physically, but they wouldn't go after black people. They wouldn't hang them. They wouldn't drown them. They wouldn't stone them. They wouldn't crush them. They wouldn't burn them because they were so afraid of their magic. They were so afraid of their witchcraft that when a black person died who they thought was magical, they would destroy that person's remains. They would destroy that person's possessions because they were so afraid of it. Moving forward in our history to voodoo, hoodoo, root work, conjure, those are all American folk magic. They fall under the umbrella of American folk magic. And you can look at Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans. She encouraged her followers to go to Mass. She encouraged her followers to go to church and to venerate the Loa as patron saints of the church. Saint Expedite, Papa Legba. Saint Bridget, Maman Brigitte. And the list goes on and on. It was black magic. It wasn't white magic. It wasn't Euro magic. It was uniquely African American black magic. Even today, when people hear the invocation of Papa Legba, or they see some of the rituals that come out of Haiti or the Yoruba people, or any trans-African spiritual belief system, it makes them severely uncomfortable. You can see it in their faces. And that is because we have been trained, I have been trained, to fear black people. I struggle with my own racism because of our society's conditioning and training. To look at the videos of barefooted African folks dancing around a fire and think that is dangerous. To be uncomfortable with it. And that is hard for me to admit, because I would like to say that I am the world's best social justice advocate. But I struggle. I am struggling against the way I was taught. I'm struggling against how I was programmed. And this is a small step towards fixing that, is admitting that I struggle with that. That when I heard the term black magic growing up, it wasn't used to describe magic as a whole. It was used to describe black people. And so I understand that I may be viewing this through my own myopic little lens. But based off of what academic research I could find, of which there is not very much, most academic sources will say that black magic is a racist term. Because, again, I will say this again and again and again and again until it gets through people's head. It was used to describe black witchcraft, or witchcraft and spirituality practiced by black people. It also had the connotation of being satanic. It had an evil. It was an intrinsically evil connotation. So in the American colloquial lexicon, black magic is a racist term. And I hope you don't use it anymore. There are other areas of our craft that we have to look at and examine the racism that has permeated it, and how magic and the occult have been used to bludgeon marginalized communities. One of the most prominent examples happened in the 20th century, in the 1940s. One of the most prominent examples comes out of the 20th century in Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. Whether or not you know it, the Third Reich was very occult-oriented. Yeah, Indiana Jones makes it a laugh, and oh, the American is beating the Nazis, haha! That's based on reality. The Nazis relentlessly pursued holy relics to aid in their conquest. But beyond that, they believed in the Aryan race. They believed that there was a race of people that they were the direct descendants of, that were better than everyone else. And that was largely supported by spiritualism. That these people were somehow divine. And that black people and Jews and gays and the Romani people, how they were called gypsies, were less than. because of this belief. And this belief was in part used to exterminate millions of lives. You can even look at our own history in the United States, that there are certain practices and rituals specifically designed to protect oneself from black magic. In America, we are taught to think of black people as tribal, as invoking the dark spirits from the dark continent. And that is very uncomfortable to look at. You can look at conceptions and ideas and sentiments expressed about voodoo and hoodoo and root work and conjure and American folk magic and see the implicit racial bias that American witches have towards it. You can look at Native American beliefs and the beliefs of the First Nations and see the implicit bias that people have against it because it comes from a brown person or a black person. That our magic is somehow better or more powerful or more pure. It goes back to that Nazi ideal that white is right. If it ain't white, it ain't right. And I see that all over YouTube. I see it all over TikTok. These people mindlessly spouting shit off. And it's so heartbreaking. Because looking at the history of witchcraft, looking at the history of magic, is to look at a history of bloodshed and death and persecution. You would think that we could understand that we could sympathize with it somehow. And yet, we don't, because nobody is willing to call it out. And that's what I'm trying to do, especially with the protests going on. That Celtic witchcraft, druidry, brujeria, none of it is better than. We are all equal. Yes, there are more advanced practitioners who are more powerful, but that doesn't make their magic better. It means that they are more disciplined and have studied longer. And that is the point of this video, is to say that witchcraft and those who practice witchcraft and those within the community cannot be racist. And you must become aware of your own racist proclivities and fight against them. You cannot go and not examine your own biases, because systemic racism in the United States has trained us to do this. To say all lives matter, silly. Yeah, all lives do matter, but right now we need black lives to matter as much as white lives. Because their lives matter, just less than. Their magic matters, just less than. You can look at how we treat their closed practices, Santeria, voodoo, the spirituality of the First Nations. I know I keep beating that drum, but I hope it sets in. We look at it and say, oh, I can study that. It's not closed to me. Why do you do that? Why do people do that? Because we have the colonial entitlement behind us. We went in, we raped, we pillaged, we stole, and we enslaved. And that same mindset is what tells modern witches that they can practice whatever the hell they want. And you can't. Until you can look at a voodoo practitioner, until you can look at a practitioner who's a person of color and say, I respect your beliefs. I would like to study it in an academic sense. Is that okay? And seek permission before just launching headlong into it. Little things like that can help you be less of a racist butthole. I'll be honest, when I first started practicing witchcraft, I did look at those traditions and had those thoughts. I did. And it has been hard to unlearn that. But God, it is so worth it. Because the respect and understanding and the shared humanity is what matters. It doesn't matter whose God is bigger or badder. It matters if we recognize other people as our brothers and sisters. So, at the end of the day, if you are a witch, You cannot say all lives matter. You cannot be racist. You cannot be anti-LGBT. You cannot stand against any marginalized community. Because to say that you are a witch is to take on the mantle of oppression and persecution that our community has been through for millennia. To allow racism to exist in Norse paganism is obscene. To try to claim Norse paganism and be racist and use it for racist purposes is obscene. I recognize that the Norse pagan community and the leaders thereof are trying to fight this, but they need our help. We have to stand up, and by whatever means necessary, root out the systemic racism endemic to the witchcraft community. We cannot be silent, and we cannot countenance racist people in our communities any longer. The excuse of, it's my beliefs, you can't question them, is no longer valid. It has never been valid. So, 3 things that you can do to be a better ally. Don't tell marginalized communities how to protest. Don't tell marginalized communities how to feel, and don't make excuses for systemic racism. And with that, I'm the head librarian, and I hope to see you again.